Well, thank you very much, Kylie, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Many thanks to CEDA and CME for the invitation to Cameco to be part of the resources overview this morning. What I'd like to do is share 4 messages with you this morning. Firstly, an introduction of Cameco and our activity here in Australia. Secondly, to provide an overview of the uranium market as we see it today, and equally important as we see it down the track. Then I'd like to look at some of the challenges and the opportunities that present itself to Australia, and concluding with some comments about changing attitudes, particularly toward uranium mining. I will be making some forward-looking statements. So who is Cameco? Well, we're one of the largest uranium producers in the market. We're operating in Canada, US, Kazakhstan one day. It's our hope. We're operating here in Australia. We have about 16% of the world market share. We're also active with our exploration programs around the globe. Our bread and butter is uranium exploration, mining, and milling. However, we're also involved with some activity further down the chain in the nuclear cycle. We have conversion facilities. We're looking at some new technology in terms of enrichment, and we have fuel fabrication facilities. And we're very proud to be Canada's largest industrial employer of Aboriginal people. In terms of our activity here in Australia, let me start at the top end. In fact, we entered the Aussie market about 20 years ago, based in Darwin, and today continue to conduct greenfields exploration programs in East Arnhem Land. But really it was 2008 and the acquisition of the Kintyre project. This was a former Rio asset sitting in the East Pilbara. And I should acknowledge our joint venture partners, Mitsubishi, who are here today. We've done a heck of a lot of work on this project since 2008. Effectively, we have an Indigenous land use agreement in place with the Mardu. We've taken the project through environmental assessment and approvals, but it is resource challenged in a tough uranium market. We continue to explore for additional uranium in and around the project to get it ready for a time when the uranium price recovers. In 2012, Kylie, you were pretty darn close. Yeelirrie is the project. It's a former WMC and BHP asset. It's one of the largest undeveloped uranium assets in the business. And we've been focusing primarily over the last year on marching the project through the assessment and approval process. In fact, it's in the public review domain today. And for Yeelirrie, for Kintyre, our strategy in Australia is to advance these projects at a measured pace in line with market conditions and to get the projects ready for a time when the market demands new uranium production. I'd like to turn to the uranium market. This is a slide I've pinched from World Energy Outlook 2014, and it looks at world electricity consumption. This is the main use of our product. It's also uranium also used in the medical field, but primarily our product is used for electricity generation. And we have a compelling story in terms of the long-term market fundamentals. When we look at consumption down the track, and as you can see in the blue color, these are non-OECD countries. These are countries that demand all the things we enjoy in the Western world, and they require safe, reliable, affordable baseload energy to advance their communications, their transportation, education programs in the countries in which they deliver the energy. There are 2 billion people globally today without electricity, and if we look further down the track to 2050, there will be another 2 billion people without electricity. Nuclear must be part of the mix, and there's been some recent media centered around other forms of energy, and look, there's room for all to play in this space, but nuclear in a carbon-constrained environment has to be part of the mix. Let me use 2 examples to demonstrate the growth for nuclear power, and I'll start, to no surprise, with China. There are 26 operating nuclear power plants today. 24 under construction, and dozens more planned in the next 10 years and beyond. And for those who've visited China in recent times, you understand the challenge with air pollution. And over the last 2 years, the Chinese are getting serious about air pollution. They're getting serious about climate change, and nuclear will play a more significant role in the future in China. Let me turn to India, another important market. In fact, by 2030, the projection is population of India, in fact, surpasses China. They have 21 reactors operating today, 6 under construction, and again, a massive plan for the future. In fact, one target I've recently read was a 25% nuclear energy mix by 2050. Cameco recently signed a supply agreement with India. It's £7 million over 5 years, not significant in terms of volume, but strategic for the company to enter this market. And it's been done under the auspices of a Canada-India nuclear cooperation agreement. You can see Prime Minister Modi on the left and the former Prime Minister of Canada, second from the right in the gray hair. This agreement is important for our business, and really pleased to see the Australia-India nuclear cooperation agreement that was signed in 2014. There needs to be some work done on the administrative agreement, but the expectation is that's to be ratified in 2016. And I know Gary Gray's in the audience, and want to thank Gary for his support to get this agreement in place. This is important. That will allow Aussie product to be sold into the India market. So when we look at demand, it's reasonably well understood. It's the supply side that presents the challenge. And 15% of the demand will need to be filled by new supply within the next 10 years. Not an insignificant task, particularly in the context of the current market. The uranium market today is depressed, there's oversupply, and companies around the globe are making decisions based on the current market conditions where projects are being deferred and delayed, and in fact some operations being shut. And I'll use a few examples. In country, BHP's Olympic Dam expansion has been deferred. ERA's Ranger Mine has deferred their underground expansion. And if I look at the Kintyre JV project, we've deferred moving into a definitive feasibility study. And there are many more examples. So here we are in a market where current operators are deferring expansion, deferring project construction, where we see down the track a supply that's going to be required. There are several signposts that we see to measure changes, and particularly in the near-term, mid-term market. And let me start at the top with reactor restarts, and I'm referring to Japan. Post-Fukushima, the 54 reactors that were operating in Japan have been shut, and they're slowly getting these reactors back online. There are 2 operating today and a number of others in the queue. This will change market sentiment. There's excess inventory in the system, and we're starting to see that work its way through. Reactor construction, in addition to China and India, is full on in countries like South Korea, Russia, the Middle East, and interesting watching the UK, where French technology, Chinese financing will build the new reactors in the UK. So we're seeing this reaction construction. In fact, there are 64 plants under construction as we speak today. We also need a return to long-term contracting. And what I mean by that, for a company like Cameco, our product is committed into 2018. And the utilities, the nuclear power plants, their positions are covered into 2018. They're going to have to get back into the market soon, and this will put some upward pressure on the uranium price. Supply performance, this is, as I've alluded to, this is how current producers are responding to market conditions. So once we start to see some of these market signals and these signposts moving, we will experience a recovery in the uranium price. So the potential for Australia, and the potential is significant. It's a busy slide, but on the right you'll see uranium resources scattered about the countryside. If you focus on the bottom left, Australia has significant uranium resources in the ground, and if you compare that to Canada, Niger, and Kazakhstan, Australia is well positioned. In fact, the Australian endowment represents about 30% of global uranium resource base. That's an opportunity. If we look at uranium production over the last 10 years, and the Aussie numbers are shown in the yellow line, in fact, today, uranium production in Australia represents 10% of the market share. Canada in red, and the story really has been all about the Kazakhs, who today dominate about 40% of the market share. So here's the dilemma. We host 30% of the global resource, yet we produce 10% of world production. Let me speak to some of the challenges, and these challenges are not specific to the uranium sector. Many are across the resource industry spectrum. Regulatory reform, we must work within an environment more streamlined, optimizing the regulatory processes. And I'm encouraged by the process we've made with the feds and the various states, looking to streamline, to work toward a one-stop shop. I think we're moving down the track, but there's certainly more work to be done. Specific for the uranium sector, infrastructure is critical. The product that we ship out of the uranium mills today, it's destined for ports in Adelaide and Darwin. Those are the only licensed ports we have in the country. If we're going to expand this industry, we need access to additional ports. And investment certainty. Certainly capital knows no boundaries. We enjoy bipartisan support at the federal level, but there are many states flipping and flopping on their uranium policy. Queensland is a good example, and quite frankly, in WA, Labor has a policy which is stuck in the 1970s. Let me acknowledge the support we have received from Minister Bill Marmion and the Department of Mines and Petroleum. The support we receive in a tough market is much, much appreciated. And then the market. I've spoken to some of the signals we're looking to change, and once we start to see some of these signposts moving, we think the uranium sector will be well placed. I'll conclude with some comments about changing attitudes, particularly toward uranium mining. The South Australia Royal Commission into the full nuclear cycle, I think, is a great example and a bold initiative from a Labor government, in fact, a premier who, on record, was anti-nuclear in his own ideological position. This Royal Commission is looking at expanding exploration, mining, and milling in South Australia. They're looking at further processing opportunities, conversion, enrichment, fuel fabrication, and electricity generation, which is it's a hot topic. It's a discussion that may land on a position a decade or two down the track, but the fact we're having the discussion now, I think, is positive. And then they're also looking at waste storage and disposal opportunities for today. So while focused on South Australia, really this is a proxy for the country, and many of us are watching very closely the proceedings and the report due in 2016. We're also seeing attitudes shifting based on recent polling. And if we look to the far right, this is data from South Australia, a jurisdiction that's had 3 decades of uranium mining. And the support, and this includes support and those indifferent to uranium mining, sits at about 74%. Closer to home in Western Australia, the numbers total 64%. So attitudes are shifting towards uranium mining. So in conclusion, I believe we have a bright future for uranium mining in this country, particularly in this state. We need the next wave of projects to get up. We've heard from iron ore, we'll hear from LNG. Those projects are moving from the construction phase to the operation phase. The uranium sector has the ability to create jobs, business development opportunities, royalties and revenue, perhaps not at the scale and the scope of the LNG and iron ore projects, but certainly an opportunity for WA. So with that, Kylie, I'll say thank you very much, folks, and we'll circle back for Q&A later in the program.